Welcome to the fastest daf in town. Today we'll start this Sotah daf Chavav. We did see some of Chav Hamid Beis. We're going to start all the way from the top, very small Amud, by the two dots, second line from the top. Muberes Chavero. So we mentioned, what is this case of a Muberes Chavero? This is a situation where a woman is pregnant, in which we do not want, if she's pregnant or nursing, and then let's say she's no longer with that husband, we don't want anyone to marry her for the next couple of years, because that could possibly take away from the child that is, let's say, currently nursing. And if she gets pregnant again immediately afterwards, she may not care as much for this child from her previous relationship. So Rav Nachman Amar Rabba Boravua Machlokis Bakar Zakena. The whole Machlokis, whether or not between Rabbi Lezer and that says that maybe you can just marry someone else, the whole issue of Puravu, and therefore you have to end up being married to someone who is capable of having children, is maybe only referring to an Akara and a Zakena. Because a woman who is barren or someone who is older, says Rashi, the lekel memer einu shaisa, el taima misham doli chazel lekaima el laplik rebelezer v'yemer rui lekaima he diachol lisi shacheres. That the only time you can possibly say there's an argument, again, whether or not he could just marry someone else, is dafka here. About islandess, a woman who is incapable ever of having a child, diver kolo shaisa v'lo notelis ksubasa. Says Rashi, nihi nami derui lekaima. Even though it's technically true, you could still remain married to her. Mihu lo shasya mehai taima deru'oy lehiroyin be'inon. It has to be someone who's fit to be pregnant. V'akara alidi maka. The truth is, this woman who became an akara, it's not because she was born that way, but something happened to her. She got into some type of an accident. So she was really born in the status of a healthy woman, and therefore, because of that, that is a different situation than an islandess who is never capable. As well as a Zakena, says Rashi, Mina de Bas Hiroyin he koid mechen. She was able to have a child, then she just got older, and then after menopause, she was not able to do it anymore. Couldn't have a kid. Islandess mibetin ima lukuyahi v'lo chazia. When it comes to an islandess, even at the time when this child or the fetus is in its mother, even at that moment it was already an islandess, and therefore everyone says loy shaisa, she's not going to drink smei sota, and she will not get the ksuba. She never have a nix of an Israel zera. Misha darko hazri yatzazushi and darko hazriya. So that's what we end up saying. According to everyone, we say in this situation she will not drink from the mei sota, and if suspect, then she would leave and not receive her ksuba. Now, on this, the Gemara is going to wonder if, in fact, it's true that everyone holds l'divrei hakoil that this is the din by an islandess meisvei. So we have a Tosefta that brings down a lot of things that we've already seen. Hamekani l'risasai u'shemeres yavam shelo. So let's say you have a woman who's an oros, which is the beginning of our parak. She's engaged, and then you warned her, don't seclude yourself with another man, or for that matter, shemeres yavam, the yavam, the brother of her deceased husband, who had, again, he died and they were childless, so now she's a shemesh yavam. She's warned by him. So in this situation, shelo im ad shelo konsunistra. So they were warned at that state, and then immediately afterwards she still secluded herself. In other words, she was only engaged, or she was still just a shemesh yavam. They weren't fully married, and then afterwards she secluded herself. She did everything at the time of Erison or as a shemesh yavam. So lo shaisel notas ksubasa. In that situation, because it says tachas ishach, it has to be that the person is completely married to her. So a shemesh yavam and an oros is a fiance, is not your wife yet, and therefore the din of Sotah doesn't apply. But because she did seclude herself, she's not going to get her ksuba either. As we continue Chaf Vav Amud Aleph. However, Muberes Chavero, Meinekas Chavero. If you have this situation, we have a woman, as we saw before, who is nursing a child, let's say that case, Divi Rameir. So in that situation, again, we do not want this relationship to continue because of the life of this child, the danger of this child who is being nursed, and the mother just decides to get remarried within the 2-year period, which she wasn't supposed to, so she leaves that relationship. Because Rameir says you're not supposed to have done so. And if you did this, which you weren't supposed to, so we're very strict, and we say because we care about this child's life more than her relationship with this man. She could have waited a couple of years, but instead she wanted to get married right away, which was wrong, which could potentially endanger the life of this child, so therefore she has to leave the relationship. That's the sheet of Rameir. Says Rashi, Knasa Kansuhu Rabbanan. It's not a din deraisa, because mid deraisa it's a kedushin. It's not like she's din nevera, that it's a lav or kares, but it's for the protection of this child. The Chachamim Ormim Yoitzi, that she does leave now. However, we're not going to say it's forever. At the end of the day, after this child is older, 20-year-old kid, why can't she remarry him? All right? Or after she's done nursing him, after a couple of years, there's no danger anymore. So, even though l'chatchila she shouldn't have done so, the mitzias is that the Chachamim are makel in this regard. Okay, continuing. V'ha rove, Rashi says, Bachor, kamo yeled. You have a young boy, Shenasa Akara, and he married a barren woman, who's a Kana, or an older woman. The Einlo Ishu Banim Mikar, and he has no other children. He's not married, he wasn't previously married, and he has no children. So in this situation, she would not drink Sotah, and she does not get her ksuba. So again, l'chara, it's pretty clear it's because she's an akara, or is a kana, and he's mechuyev to marry someone who is shayach to have children. That's a mitzvah puravu. Rabbi Lezer says, no, don't go that far. Let her remain with this first woman. Okay, so she's a zakena, she is an akara, but again, let him marry someone. He can marry someone else. So we see so far it's pretty consistent to what we began with, that the machlokas is bakar zakena, whether or not we say that they have to leave this relationship, or she gets her ksuba, or she can stay. However, in the situation if you're a makana, again, oris or shemer shavam, umishinichnasa, umishikansa, nistera oshaisa, lo notos ksuba. So this is different. Not that they were only warned and also secluded at the time of Erison or Shemer Shavim. Yes, she was warned at the time of engagement of Erison, or the time of as a Shemer Shavim. But she didn't act upon anything. She did not seclude herself until she was fully married. So in that situation, since the actual, even though it's true the warning took place before, but the actual seclusion took place while they were married, so therefore the din is that the laws of Sotah do apply. And therefore, again, she has a choice. She can drink. If she doesn't, then she's not going to get ksuba. Muberesumi nekes atzmoi, let's say he impregnated his own wife. Oshosa olonotelos ksubasa. So this is a pretty unbelievable statement. If your wife is pregnant, even though we want to protect the child, but that doesn't mean we're going to allow the loophole that the din of Sotah won't apply. If a woman is pregnant, we will still have her drink Mei Sotah. Haro, which of course could have potentially negative consequences, unless maybe it could be postponed until after she gives birth, which again is possible. Could, if she has schus, it can go as much as 3 years. Harovish shenas akaro zakena, let's say you have this young man who marries an akara zakena, the Yeshua Yeshua Avanim, and he already has children, he's got a bunch of kids, he's got another wife, or shaisa olonotas ksuba. And everyone holds in that situation, certainly he's allowed to be married to her because he already has children. So therefore, the dinim of Sotah do apply because they can remain married. Eishes mamzer l'mamzer, ve'eishes nasin l'nasin, ve'eishes ger ve'evan meshucher, ve'ailonis, oishaisa olo notelos ksuba. Now here's the key line, even though we have all these other pieces, we see clearly that there's an opinion that if you marry an ailonis, the din is that she's shaisa. There is the din of Sotah by an ailonis. But we said in the beginning of our class, in the beginning of the shir, we said, with divrei hakoil, ailonis divrei hakoil lo shaisa v'lo subasa. Here it says beferish that she could be shaisa. So it's it's a stira. So Katani mi ailonis tiyofta Rab Nachman. It's a tiyofta on the sheet of Rab Nachman, which we saw on the very top of Amud Beis. So Amalach Rab Nachman, you're right. Tanoihi. Yonadamiki haitana. The son you have Shimon ben Elezer Oimer ailonis lo shaisa v'lo ksuba. You're right. There is an opinion like that, but it's actually a machlokas. Also, when it comes to an ailonis, and I feel that with divrei hakoil, everyone would say that she's not shaisa. Shnemar v'nixam nizra zera misha darkul hazriya. Only someone who is shaykh to have a child. V'yotzes azu shein darkul hazriya. V'rabbanan hay v'nixam nizra zera ma'yavadalei. According to them, that's not the drasha of this pasuk, because then it would exclude the ionis. So meboil lehu likadasani, you need it for the following: v'nixam nizra zera shim haisu akara nifkedes. This is also quoted in Gemara Brachos, part of Tefilas Chana, in the 5th paragraph over there. If she is not able to have a child, she'll be able to have a child. Divrei Rabbi Kiva. Amar Rabbi Shmuel Yimkin Yisasur Kol HaKadois V'Yipokdu V'Zu Hoya V'Lo Nistra Hefsida, which is exactly what Tefilas Chana was. Said, if this person was a tzaddikus and does everything right, she's never going to have a child. But if she locks herself into a room, which is wrong, with a man, and of course she's not going to have tashmish with him, and all of a sudden she'll drink the meisait to go through this whole thing and be found to be innocent, then she's going to have a child? How could it be that we will provide an incentive for someone that does the wrong thing? So in Cain, Matam Loimer B'Nixim in Israel Zera, Shim Ha'isa Yoladis B'Tsar Yoladis B'Revach. If you've given birth, you have to have given birth before, but instead of it being a painful birth, it'll be less painful. If you had only one gender, for example, girls, you start having boys. If they're like small, they'll end up being bigger. If they're of a particular complexion, they'll have a different complexion, but the children will be the same. They're not. It's not going to be. You're not going to have a child. You'll have a child, because otherwise you're incentivizing bad behavior. Eishes mamzer la mamzer pshita. Why can't they get married? They're made for each other. Madatema afushi psuin lo lipush. Kamash Milan says Rashi. Lo nasa shalom b'nehem. Why should we make peace between two mamzerim? Havai lo yifra lo yirbe. Let them not have kids. Hol v'chol d'oraisa mamzerim. All their children are going to be mamzerim, so why would we want to try to encourage future generations? Kamash Mulan, that's not the right way of thinking. I mean, Mitzias is if they're allowed to be married to one another, they're allowed to be married to each other. And therefore the dinim of Sotah apply. Eishes ger ve'evan meshuchor ve'ailonis shita, which maybe they remove out ailonis. Ve'evan meshuchor Tevas v'ailonis nimchok, because ailonis is definitely not pshita, because it's a machlokes, right? Pshita somada tema dabra b'nei Yisrael v'lo gerim. So you would think maybe since it says b'nei Yisrael, it means someone who was born as a yid, not a ger, who was converted. Kamashman ve'ema hachinami v'amart riboyahu. So the extra word is a riboy to include. Eishes kain shaisa. Even the Eishes kain is going to drink, even though we know when it comes to a woman who is ma'anis. Normally, if she's married to if she's an Eishes Yisrael, married to the regular Yisrael, so then she's mutter to him. But if it's an Eishes Kain, she'll be usher, even if she was raped. So Eishes Kain shaisa subshita ma'adatema v'hilun ispasa if asura han ispasa muteris. So normally, when it comes to rape, if she was not forced, which means that it was buratzain, that she did it willingly, that's when she becomes her husband. Which is mashma, if it was by force, it was against her will, there was coercion, then she's still mutter to her husband. That's by Yisrael. However, this Eishes Kohen, Hoyel Menisbasua, even if she's forced, asur, she's still usher to her husband. You would think maybe in that situation she would not drink either. So kamashmon, the chiddush is that even though we're more strict when it comes to this woman, in this situation we're still going to test because maybe nothing happened at all. Umuteris labala, so this Eishes Kohen will now be mutter to her husband if she's found to be innocent. So pshita, why not? Why would she be usher to her husband? So Rav Huna b'misnavna, because she drank, says Rashi, but she got weakened. So you would think that she'd be usher to her husband in that situation. After she drank, we want to still say that she's mutter. Since the water tested her, and she was misnavna, so Gemara says one second, misnavna habat kul maya. In that situation, we can clearly see she's zayna, and it says in Parshas Emor, it says that an ish zayna a kohen is not allowed to take such a woman. So clearly, it was the water proves it. The fact that she's misnabed, okay, she didn't die right away, but you can see the fact that her whole body is deteriorating. That's a raya that she was guilty. So why would she be mutter? Only certain parts. Says Rashi, she'enu misnabda b'moyim b'berichayim. It wasn't the parts in which the Torah say the hip, thigh, the stomach. Elu roisha shar b'recha. Her head starts hurting. Other limbs, something's happening, but it's not the part which was supposed to be happening. Maybe Shitaka was Mizana. The reason why the water's not testing her normally, because she really was. It wasn't that she was Mizana, but it was forced. It was an inus in which by an Eishes Kohen is still asked to her husband, and that's the reason why the water is not punishing her to actually, let's say, have her killed, but it's enough to show that something happened, to be able to show that she actually did have relations with him, albeit b'oinus, but that would still answer her to her husband. Well, gabi koyin asir kamashmulan. So kamashmulan, that's not what happened. Eishes Saris shaisa. So what is an Eishes Saris? So let's see the Gemara. Pshita. So, a sris, someone who was castrated. We'll have to see Rashi and Taisus. What is an Eishes Sris? What is a sris? But a man who can't have children. So you would think that he would be excluded. Kamashmon is not. Says Rashi, "Sris chama kaimer." The mutalakaima v'lobasris adam was referring to someone who was Sris Cham, like by the sun. Knows naturally he was a Sris, and not a Sris Adam. Shasal Kaimim Mishulam Lo Yavo Patsua Daka. So there's a difference between a Sris Chama and a Sris Adam. Says Taisus. Perish Rashi the Sris Chama, where a Sris is talking about a Sris Chama. Veloy Sris Adam Shasal Kaima, because the Sris Adam cannot remain married, because the pasuk does say lo yavo patsua daka. Lo yadinim and known the Sris Adam, and I don't know. How does he know about that? This din is by a Sris Adam. Kigain sheshasa kais ikrin de asal kaima. Okay, which again, it's explaining what is the case of Sris Adam, that you made yourself incapable of having a child. So if it's Sris Chama, which was something like natural that happened, part of birth, then you're allowed to. But if it's a Sris Adam, which is, I think that if I recall, that's the pshat, I think that's what Taisus is telling us, that a Sris Adam is Sheshasa Kais Ikrin, that they drank something. Okay, let's look at question 13. Eishes Sris Ha'im Shaisa. So Beferish, it says that she is Shaisa. Question 13. But it depends. Sris Adam, says Rashi, Einu Shaisa. Because a Sris Adam, you're not allowed to remain married. Sris Chama, is shaisa. Uva Mishnah Perish Rashi the Davka shenisris l'achar shenasa. Going to Perish Rashi in the Mishnah, we're talking about a sris after they got married. Va'ayin marsha has to be that only, not that he was already a sris, but he became a sris afterwards. Okay. Pshita, so that's a sris. Al yedei kol rayas mekanin. All other arayas any arayas you can always warn, don't be with this guy, even if it's an arayas which she's not supposed to be with anyway. So pshita, as we continue to Chavav Medbeis, Ma'adatema nitma shnei pamim. It says it in the parsha 2 times. Echad l'bal ve'echad l'boil. One saying she's going to be usher to her husband. The other one saying she's going to be usher to the man she was with. So heichad dekam mitzra, only when she becomes usher b'haznus, with that znus does he become usher. Does she become usher to him? Avaha hayil v'asura v'kaima. Over here, like for example, her brother, it's an Arias, she was already usher. So emalo kamashmon. Maybe you would think that it doesn't work over there. So the chiddush is, even when it comes to krayvim, the din still applies. That you could still be mekana. Chutz min a katan v'chul, not a child. I don't want you to seclude yourself with that 5-year-old kid. Ish rachman avol katan. The pasuk says in ish, excluding a kid. The shenu ish limuti mai. When it says she'enu ish, someone who's not a man, is not a katan. So why does it say that she'enu ish? Maybe it's talking about someone who is impotent, says Rashi. Shebasaro nishchaf, his flesh withered away. The kol of yavish, it's like dried up. The enu koyach, he has no strength. The v'taris kohanim b'klol sheninu dugmaso yeshach adam shehu choyle umutu b'mita. Some guy's like bedridden. So he's just sitting there, basically dying in hospice. That person is gonna not someone you have to worry about having tashmish with your wife, and therefore you shouldn't be warning her against him. He says that you are mekana. So even when we're dealing with a shachav, who poisel b'truma, and also could passel with truma. So mekanan lo al yadai pshita mahadatem v'shachavi shosa shechva zera marachmana v'hova barhachi hu kamashmon. So you would think because he's impotent, he's not shaykh to be able to produce shechva zera. So therefore, even if it's nothing, no, it would still be a bia, and even though he's a shachav, so therefore we see from here clearly that it does work. So obviously we're going to see that cannot be what. She'eno ish. This guy's still an ish. Why is he not an ish? Because he's not able to be moitzi shechva zera. However, the mitzias is that he is still a man, and therefore you could still be mekana. That would still work. Who poisel b'truah pshita. L'chayra, it's posh. It says Rashi, im hu echad min hapsulim. If he's apostle, mischal lenas isha, he can profane the woman. Kagon over kachavim eved chol nasin mamzer the kam kedushin the v'yamus the poison isha bebiyasan. Echad law ve'echad lazara, says Rashi. So apostle, for example, if she's boiled over kachavim, so the din is she becomes a halal. So that's another pashut by this guy as well. So ma'adatei lo yichal zara marachman at islay zera l'chal. The leisla zera lo yichal kamashmon. The chiddush is that you would think it's only someone who's shaykh to have kids who can. It's not only will she become a chol, but her children become a chol. So this man who is a shachav, who's not shaykh because he can't be moitzi shech v'zera, maybe there's no din of making her to a chal either. No, she can become a chalala. Nonetheless, we still have the kasha. What does it mean when it says shenu ish? What's it coming to exclude? It's not coming to exclude a shachav. That you warn, please do not seclude yourself with this non-Jewish man. That doesn't mean anything. It's not true. That it actually does work again. So we see you could be mekana, you could warn her against an avikachavim. Ma'adatema nitma shnei pamas. This is twice. Echad abal ve'echad aboil. Heicha dikamitzdera b'haznos. Abaha hayab yasur v'kaima emelo kamashmons. As I said before, regarding Kroivim, Kolorayas, so it doesn't matter, even though he was always usher to her. A Jewish woman was never allowed to be on a Chachavim. So you think maybe this din only applies to a man who typically you would be allowed to have relations with, but since you're married, you can't. But this man you can never anyway, so therefore maybe in this situation there's no kinoi. Kamashmal there is. Upoisa b'truma pshita, he's apostle. So madatemu baskoin kisiel ish zar. Kisiel is a lashon kedushin. So amrachman davar havoya in the davar havoya lo kamashmal. So you would think that maybe he shouldn't be able to, because there's no din kedushin. The apostle Rabbi Yochanan, Mishum Rabbi Shmuel, he said Rabbi Shmuel, Manan lo b'chavim be'abed Shabual hakohenes v'lavi aval bas Yisrael. If you have a man who's an Abed Chavim, he has relations with a bas Yisrael even, shipasuha, that it invalidates her, which means it makes her into a halala, which means then she can't marry a kohen, etc. Shnemar bas kohen kisia almana grusha. So she could go back to her father's home in this situation as a mother grusha to eat truma, if she's a bas kohen, if her father's a kohen. However, by akum, she's going to be pasul truma. Misheshul almonos v'gerushin ba yotov v'chachavim ve'eved she'in ba almonos v'gerushin ba. So that's how we learn out that there's no din of marriage, there's no din of, she wouldn't be divorced or widowed. If she's living with an Oved Chachavim and then that man dies, she's not an almana, because it's not a kedushin, it has nothing. But nonetheless, she's still going to be pasul through that bia, she becomes a halal. Anyway, again, we're back to our question again. What does it mean when it says she'enu ish? So the answer is an animal. That if you say, don't seclude yourself with this animal, that's nothing. Because that's, even if a person technically can be engaged in bestiality, which of course is against the Torah and I think against the law, at least next few minutes in this country, the Metzias is that what we are saying is it's not considered to be halachically as nus for it to constitute a kinui. Okay, question 14. Al yedei kol reis mekanu chutz min hakatim v'shenu ish. My kamash mon mekanan marayas. So he said, because you would maybe think the only time we see aser the boil is only when he became aser because of the znus. Over here he was already aser kamash mon. And what does it mean she'enu ish? That is referring to a behema. Okay, so that answers that question. Weiter. So Amrulei Rava mi Parzakya or Ravashi Minaha Milsin Amrabanan in Znus Behema. How do we know that there's no such thing as znus when it comes to having relations with an animal? Daksiv Lusavi Estan Zainamacher Kelev V'Goimer. So when it comes to an esnan, the din is that you're not allowed to take money which was given for prostitution, and that money is it does not have, or an animal, let's say, that cannot be brought as a carbon. V'tanya esnan kelev u'macher zayna mutarim. However, an esnan kelev u'macher zayna is mutter. What does that mean? Esnan. So let's look at Rashi. Esnan zayna nasan taleb esnana. That if you gave a sheep, an animal, in order to have tashmish, so that's not allowed to be brought as a carbon. Macher kelev hichlef kelev b'tleh. If, let's say, you switched a dog for a more chashav animal, let's say, and let's say that difference was the tashmish for the paying of service, so in that situation it cannot be brought as a carbon. Esnan kelev sheim adam oimer l'zayna. If a man says to a zayna, helach tleh, take this tleh, v'habali l'kalbi, and have be with my dog. Macher zayna haisel shivcha zayna. He had a shivcha who was a zayna, v'chlifa b'tleh, and he exchanged it for a tleh, v'chlal d'lav znosu. The din is that this animal is going to be mutter. If she ends up, let's say, receiving this tleh and has tashmish with a kelev, so that's nothing. However, she would have had tashmish with a man, and this tleh, this animal, would be usher as a carbon. So therefore, it must be the fact that we're making a distinction between her having a tashmish with a human being or an animal shows that in znus bebehema. Gam shneim shnayim b'loy arba. So it's shnayim that then only applies to these two, but not by these four situations. Says Rashi, Kifandi Amrit Mikanyan al Shochuf. Since it says that even a shochuf, someone who's impotent, you could warn. So then why does it mention Shechva Zera at all? Because he doesn't have Shechva Zera. Shechva Zera Prat L'Davar Acher. It's just coming to exclude something else. So my Davar Acher. Amrav Sheish Prat L'Shekini L'Shalo Kedarka. If she said, do not have tashmish with this man in an unusual way, which is Bia Shalo Kedarka. Amalei Rava Shalo Kedarka, if she has tashmish not in the normal way, that doesn't make any difference. Mishkavei Isha Ksiv, we know in all matters Mishkavei Isha. It doesn't matter if he has tashmish with her in the typical way to make a woman potentially pregnant, or in another fashion. Either way, it's still considered to have a din bia. So therefore, it can't be coming to exclude that. El Amarava Prat, because also that's why it's Shechva Zera. Even though he is going to end up being a Shechva Zera, but nonetheless, it's not Shaykh because it was Bishul Kedarka. She can't get pregnant if he has Bia with her in that way. El Amarava Prat Likashikini Laderch Evarim. It means they didn't have tashmish at all. But what they did was they were intimate in a certain way in which their limbs were rubbing toward each other, which potentially could have even have caused him to produce a zera. So that's what it's coming to exclude. Why does he even have to mention that? It's not tashmish. We know it's just people rubbing against each other. That's Peritzus. So why would the Torah even mention such a thing? Obviously that's not a kinui. I'm not saying it's a proper thing to do with another if you're married, but it's not bia. It means they had some form of tashmish, and his aver did touch oso makom, her aver, but it wasn't a full penetration. It was only neshika, just touching. That's the start of the bia of neshika v'lo klumhi, and that neshika, which is just touching, is really nothing. You actually have to do hara, is hachnasa satara, actually physically putting the male aver into her, even a small amount. But if it's just neshika, if they're just touching one another, but there's no actual physical penetration, that's nothing. That's why the pasuk is excluding it. Some people say that that's actually considered to be a bia, so why would it wouldn't exclude it? It would actually say that would also be a bia. So let's go back to originals der chavarim. So what do you mean just pritzusa? So it's all totally on the kaped, though. We've always mentioned, is the husband upset about it? He's kaped. The fact that he's warning, it's all totally on kaped. Because if she secludes herself a million times, but he never warned her, then there's no din of mesaita. It's only when she is warned by her husband, which means it's obviously there's an element of kapeda, that he's upset about it, he's particular. But if we see that, and we know, a husband would be makbid. It's not like, oh, you didn't actually have tashmish, but you had, you were engaged in derech ivarim. No husband's going to be approval of that. So maybe you would think that taka would also be a kinoi. Kamashmua, no, because the Metzias is it's not tashmish. Okay, we're going to stop there. TA 7. Madul Shmuel Adifa Doima. We didn't do that. There's nothing on that page. Question TB 7. Ha'im yesh kinoi mekaton ushalokadarka. So shalokadarka for sure, yes. Kinoi From an akum, yes. Katan, let's see. So it says an akum mekanin, v'chein labia shel kedarka. Mekatan ein mekanin. I don't know how I got that wrong. It's fairish in the Gemara, but nonetheless, when it comes to a katan ein mekanin, an akum is mekanin, v'chein labia shel kedarka. It's also mekanin. Adkan.